Awesome, that was epic. Hello. How is everyone? This lovely, awkward piece where I get to stand up and after an epic intro. So my name is Ken. I'm from Ireland and I am a digital artist doing loads of He-Man stuff, but my actual day job is teaching game art and design and animation in a university in Ireland. So the first thing I get to do is I get to come to Grayskull Con every just at the start of September, do all this, and then go back. This is my warm-up for teaching first years, so it's a lot of fun. Especially because, I have to do a fake I'm really serious pose for my school, so. Hold on. And I also get to do the artwork for the audio plays. Okay, so this is why I'm famous in Germany. This stuff. Yeah, I get to do Hasselhoff when I go home and they go, how are we getting on? I'm actually big in Germany, along a very small niche group of people. Sorry, I did that because I was given out to, because last year they were trying to take a photo and I was going la 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 and flicking all this stuff so you couldn't see. Anyway, I'm going to talk about my process because my background is actually a photographer with Photoshop and photo manipulation for my own style projects. And in the last couple of years, I was doing my own He-Man art and building landscapes and stuff. But in the last 4 or 5 years, I discovered I was using 3D modeling a lot. And I got it for my birthday, my 40th birthday, I got a 3D scanner, okay? And we now have this little kind of 3D scanning kind of He-Man Motu 3D model community. And what's really fun about that is, well, first off, with the German community and some of us in different countries, there's just a fantastic collaboration with other people who want to do custom heads for Mythic Legions, custom heads for their action figures. And I'm part of that where I scanned my entire vintage Eternia tower. I scanned the vintage Eternia New Adventures starship. I have my Viper towers. So I end up scanning my whole collection and digitizing and making 3D models of the weapons and the armor. And then I developed a system for myself for illustration where I actually make the rigs. So I have a He-Man in a T-pose on my computer. So every time I need to do an illustration of He-Man, I open this file and He-Man's standing there like this. He's got all the different layers. Like if anyone knows Photoshop, I can turn on the Thunder Punch armor, I can turn on the battle armor, I can switch them all. I've got Revelation hair, vintage hair, and the different swords, the different axes, and then I can put them in his hands and then I can pose him whatever way I want. Same with Skeletor. So I've made a rig for all the major characters for myself. And it's really fun because then Matthias calls me and goes, we need another pop-up stand for Grayskull Con. I'm like, sure, give me like 17 minutes. I'm only kidding, it takes... I think these kind of ones took me about 3 days. But to be honest, it took me 20 years to learn how to do it in 3 days. Okay, it's one of the big secrets of design and illustration when people think you can charge loads of money for doing branding. And you go, how does a little illustration I have of a guy showing a logo to a corporate businessman? And he goes, that's your new logo, it costs $10,000. And the guy says, but it took you 10 minutes to draw it. And he goes, yeah, but it took me 10 years to learn how to do it in 10 minutes, you know? And art school is expensive. So is all of the gear you need. So, but for me, it's very, very, very fun to take my kind of very multi-faceted kind of art style, which is, I studied sculpture, I studied photography, I studied printmaking. So I have all these different things, and I don't draw. I don't actually like drawing with a pencil. I see things more in 3D through a camera and through physical objects. And so when I'm doing this type of art, like the He-Man thing or She-Ra here, this is really fun because this is like a digital version of a custom action figure. So when you're ripping apart an action figure and you're trying on different armor, and for all of us as kids, that really comes from the idea that He-Man figures were so modular. Do you remember you would just like pull the armor off of He-Man and put on Merman's armor? I don't think we were all mint and box collectors in 1985. We wish we were now because we'd all have very expensive houses, you know? But back then it was like, oh, I want to make like merman armor on He-Man and make them different, and we threw the different weapons. Unless everyone has a He-Man with a chewed hand. Does anyone have that? The hand's like all chewed up on this side. So this process is very much the same thing. So this one has like, that's the Mondo sword on his back with, I can't remember what armor I did in the front. And then I 3D modeled the H off the new Revelation H off the old battle armor. It's the Revelation Cat helmet. And the shield is off the Super 7 blown up vintage shield. So it's a mix up. And it was the same, well, She-Ra she's just normal She-Ra. I didn't do anything to that. It's just She-Ra as she is. But I do a digital paint over then, so it looks like a proper oil painting. Because for me, the artwork has to resonate with our nostalgia. Okay, there's no fun in making something that looks extremely 3D like it's for PS5, because we didn't grow up with that art style, did we? No. And the fun thing for me is because I live in Ireland, I have a lot of green moss trees. Well, we all have trees. But like we've had something like, I think it's like 11,000 ruined castles around Ireland that all look like Castle Grayskull to me. So those rocks are actually a photograph of rocks in their natural colour, of a stone wall off a broken castle. And it looks exactly like it should be a Castle Grayskull wall. Okay, so that's the fun thing for me. The backgrounds in my artwork, the clouds, they're all acrylic paintings. I just go full Bob Ross. You know Bob Ross, the guy, little squirrels. I have these big canvases in college, and every year I just clean them, more white paint, and I repaint them, and I photograph them, and I make a huge library of files. Okay? So this one that you see on screen here, this big battle scene, was actually painted as a commission for Cornell, the guy beside me out in who's doing all the Playmobil city of Eternia. But all of my, the ground in my imagery here, the landscape is photographs of Ireland. And I was in Donegal, at the area where they shot episode 8 for the Millennium Falcon in Star Wars. And I photographed all that. And say, Mallinhead, yeah, I was up in Mallinhead. I always mix them up because Mizzen is the bottom one. I was in both. And I photographed both of them. And I use a lot of that landscape. And, well, one, because it's fun to tell people, that's from Star Wars in He-Man, but from Ireland. And that's macro photography of the custom build I did on I put together a really old Fright Zone, and I repainted it, because one of the projects I used to do for myself is, what if Weta Workshop Peter Jackson made He-Man? What would it look like? And I was very inspired by the new Hobbit movies. You know Dol Guldur? Anyone seen the Hobbit movies? You know the castle where the necromancer, before we find out it's Sauron, and that's not a spoiler, by the way, we all know who Sauron is. That castle, I looked at it and went, oh my God, imagine that was Castle Grayskull, this big ruined castle. And I can show you what I mean. And I don't have to actually get the photo. I just look Castle Grayskull Pinterest and I find my one. What's been really fun for me this year is 3 of my castle designs are in the He Skeletor book. So the mini comic for He Skeletor. Somebody from Nino here from Germany goes, hey, Ken, these look familiar. And he sent me a photo. I was like, holy shit, that's my stuff. So Castle Grayskull, Ken. Cool. It's great when you can just Google yourself for a presentation. You know? If I want to show people my portfolio for Battletech, because I work for Battletech, I just go to Amazon. Because all the book covers are mine. So, does anyone recognize this castle? Yeah? That was my Lord of the Rings castle I made. So it's a plastic skull that you buy in a pop-up shop for Halloween. It's polystyrene, cardboard tubes, and a bunch of Warhammer 40k windows and little pieces. And I use expanding foam, you know, stuff you use for plumbing. And I build loads of expanding foam, and then I chisel it out. So that thing is about, it's about 3 foot high. And it was a lot of fun to make. But then this piece has appeared in the He Skeletor, and the other one, this one, is also, this piece here is in the back of the He Skeletor as comic book drawings, but they're basically the same poses. And some of you might recognize this one. You recognize this? It's the Mark Taylor project. This was a lot of fun. So Mark gave me permission. I asked him first, and I said, what about if we design your whole castle, the sides and stuff? And this one was a lot of fun because what I did is Jack Gomez in Spain was our 3D sculptor, and I gave him these. So he did the front face of the castle, and he gave it to me. I put it into ZBrush. I rendered it from the side, and I live beside what is it? It's 11th century castle called King John's Castle in Limerick. And I took photographs of the side of the castle that I live beside. I don't own a castle. Well, I own 6 castles, but they're all green, and they're that tall. I have a classics. Yeah. And all of these little structures and the way the side of the building is laid out is based on Irish castles. Okay. When I say Irish castles, they were built by the English, but we won't get into that. So I gave it back to him, and he goes off and he makes the rest of the model. And then he gives me back the model, and I'm able to do the production art, which is this kind of style. You know? Here's another one I did, which was a lot of fun. And I've seen this been used by... What I really love is I see people in other countries, they print this off and they put it behind on their details, and they use it for their backgrounds for their toys. And... all I did with this one was 2 Pringle tubes, a little bit of broken Warhammer, expanding foam, and I put the skull on. And I never finished the model. I painted it so fast. I photographed it with an iPhone on purpose to see how well an iPhone resolution would hold up as a piece of artwork compared to using, because I use Canon cameras for my work as well. One of my favorite things, and you can see all my acrylic painting I use for my clouds, and a bit of Donegal thrown in there. No Millennium Falcons. Cunis in the back. That's what Irish teachers say when someone's talking. Cunis is the Irish for silence. So now I've lost my rhythm. I'll get it back in a second. A lot of Irish landscape. And what it looks like when I'm building I build libraries because I feel like there's no point putting something down on a canvas that you can't reuse, especially for commercial art. So I go in here and I have a file called Clouds and Backdrops. And when I go into Clouds and Backdrops, I made 3D models of planets. So here's a canvas. Very Eternian looking skies. And I paint 4 or 5 of these, and then I photograph them, and then I blend them together in Photoshop. So I end up with something like this. And I can drop these in as a start for my backdrops for my models. Okay? So I can't... Oh, let me see if I have a photo on my phone that I can just airdrop here. If anyone wants to see what motherboard looks like in my house, let me find this photo. So motherboard arrived the other day. I'm sure some of you have her. Airdrop this to here. Come on. Awkward silence. Oh, here we go. Receiving. Yeah. So that's what motherboard looks like in my house. I ripped it apart. And the reason is, beside my coffee over here, there's a turntable, and I put the whole figure on, and I 3D scanned all the major parts of motherboard. Okay, and the reason is, I now have a digital model. So I used the collar, the top of the body, and the head, and then I have a kind of, one of my rigs, I put like a Tron-style armor on it, and then I posed it. And I brought in one of my, I have a number of flowing cloaks that are built from different things and different parts. So it's like Lego. I don't always have to make a cloak. I just go, which way do I want the cloak flowing? Because this will end up as a 2D design, okay? So right now, it's rendering in the background. So this is the render, and this is a translucent skin. So I do it with a number of different lights. Like it's like a digital photography studio. I do all the base colors. I do the outer lights. I do the dramatic lights. I do the translucency that goes over the whole thing and really brings it together. And when it's finished, it kind of looks like an oil painting. And then I bring it in and I composite in Photoshop, which means putting in the clouds, the backdrop, a bit of foreground, atmospherics. And what I mean by atmospheric is a lot of particles, Okay, so particles are a big thing in my work. And here they are. So I have a file like this that helps me to create dust and glows, because I love the Rudy Obrero style of savage He-Man. Very volcanic, angry box art. Okay? Because when I grew up in Ireland in the 80s, the cartoon was not always on TV. Okay, you guys had the audio plays. And I found out today there from Gunnar that the main woman, I can't remember her name, she was here last year, she wrote like, what, 4,000 audio plays? She holds a world record. It's myth. And I learned all about the culture. Frida was here last year, who does the voice of, I think it was Tila she does in one of the dubbings. I think it was on the CGI Netflix, but she also does Robin in Stranger Things. So she was explaining the culture of dubbing in Germany, because we don't have dubbing as a massive culture in Ireland. We have Irish, but there's only small regions, like, you know. So dubbing is a big culture for your entertainment here in Germany. And she was explaining how, well, partly how they had to do their own production through COVID and how it works, and I thought it was brilliant. So your audio plays, for me now, I have a great respect for how much work goes into it. And it really must have opened up all your imaginations as kids, you know. So I know now why these things are so important. Because in Ireland, people go, why'd you do a He-Man CD? Nobody has CDs anymore, you know. And so I'm delighted I get to do this for you guys. You know, it's a lot of fun to do them. And it all starts like this, you know. So when the 3D model is done, can anyone guess what this is? No? It's actually baby powder on black paper. Talc. But it's really fun, because what you can do with it is, if I just find one of my pieces of art here, let me see if I have something going on. Oh yeah, here's my Magic the Gathering card of Many Faces. Do you see the little particles here? If I bring it into Photoshop and I give it a yellow and a orange tone, I can use it for lava. I also use it to do the glow around the edge, so it looks like there's a light behind the figure. And that's a very Rudy Obrero, Frank Franzetta, chiaroscuro, old painting technique, that you give a little bit of glow around the figure to enhance the silhouette. And I also make sure that all the poses are just in between two things. They're an action pose, but it's also like a pin-up pose. So you can have the character on his own, but you can also Photoshop it into a battle scene. So none of my figures ever have a direct attack pose, like, you know, He-Man is actually physically hitting Skeletor, and Skeletor is getting his head knocked off. It looks like they're about to attack. And the reason is, it has the toy pose. Because if you look at the Rudy Obrero stuff, the William George stuff, they still look like action figures, but painted by a 14th century Italian painter. That's kind of what I feel when I look at the old box art. It never has a really violent interaction. It's like cartoons. They never actually punched. You just give the impression they're punching someone. So I do that, and I get these lovely little sparks. See the little sparkles here on the guns and the energy bursts. But for making some of this art, because when I do this for Battletech as well, name drop, you have to give the sense that it's not just a pose or pin-up, that there's obviously something going on. You know, there's a narrative. And the narrative that's, for me, that's important is, obviously, Many Faces is looking at something. And, well, it's Eternia, so you can get away with doing lava, because everything's always exploding in the old artwork. Did anyone notice that? It's always cracked ground. It looks like the end of the world in all the Wind Raider artwork off the boxes, off of Grayskull. And I think that's why they have lots of muscles and furry underpants, because it's a low sense of gravity, but it's very hot at Eternia. You know? And I just spent a month in Colombia, and I'm like, yeah, I'd say Eternia is like this without the mosquitoes. I get a sense that Eternia is a very warm planet. And you could see it here. See the glow behind Battlecat. That's just talc baby powder, black paper. And when I make grit, now grit is where a figure hits the ground with its foot and there's a little bit of dirt that jumps up, and it gives a sense of movement in my artwork. And I do grit by using ground coffee on white paper, and you photograph it, and you can turn it into a brush in Photoshop. And a Stratos. Now, Stratos is not a great example. Let me see, MTG. Oh yeah, there's probably a bit of grit on Whiplash. Nope. Sorry, my computer knows that I'm using it on stage, so it likes to slow down. It's very mean. No, come on now, buddy. You can do it. I'll buy you a drink after. There you go. So yeah, loads of grit, see? But now what I'm starting to do is I'm using Procreate on the iPad. Does anyone play with Procreate on an iPad? So much fun. And I'll show you why in a second, because Procreate lets me actually put the artwork directly flipped from the MacBook onto the iPad, and I can just sit on the couch and finish the artwork, do all the painting, the detailing, the comic book, the line work, adding in extra texture while I'm sitting on the couch with my 6-year-old watching cartoons. Instead of being at a desk like this going, oh God, I got to get this finished so I can hang out, you know? So it's a lot of fun. But what I really like Whiplash here is the tail is actually off of I've forgotten his name, the Caligar leader from 2002, the leader of Whiplash's people. That's the tail off the action figure from him. It's the 2002 head, and the pose, it's a rig of one of my bodies. And I've got a file called Furry Underpants. Just loads of different types of shapes of underpants I drop in. And you can see then how I get that real painted effect, you know, the old school oil paint look. And also because I decided to make these as game cards, for fun. But I noticed when you're looking at cards like Magic the Gathering, the focus has to be on the detail in the central area, and then the background fades out like a really good photograph where it's out of focus with good depth of field. And that's a very old school technique as well for painting. Okay? So you can see by creating, all the glows, I get a strong silhouette. And I also try to create, when I'm making my He-Man characters, that the silhouette tells us something a lot about the character, because Whiplash is essentially a kind of real crocodile type character. So he's with a kind of gorilla top, and he's in that pose where, is he actually walking along? Is he looking for a contact lens, or is he about to kick the shit out of somebody? I think it's PG-13. I get 2 fucks and a shit on stage. So he's beating the shit out of somebody over here. Okay, so I like that sense in my work that there's something else going on, but we just don't see it. And it's just so much fun. But because I'm using 3D, I get to rotate the model around. I get to look at it from different angles. You get to just, like, now the rendering's going on in the background, so that means that this is going to lag. But I can just drag motherboard there, and she's going to rotate to a different position. And I can see it from all angles. The good thing about doing this style of work as well is that when I bring it to the 3D rendering program, it's got a slider for perspective. And because I have a background in photography, it's like having different lenses: wide angle, close-up, portrait, macro. And I'm able to use my skill in photography to change where I want to put the lights. And because I teach this, my students want to do everything on a computer using Maya and the Unreal Engine and all the rendering software we use for film, VFX, gaming these days. I try to get them to actually, as part of the class, photograph action figures. So I have a huge stock of Origins, Classics, Broken Toys in the art room in my college, and I get my students to change the lighting areas, like big LED lights, and they have to change the lights with the action figures to see how the light reacts and changes on a toy, because then they'll understand with their real life, with their hands, what they're doing on a computer. Because a lot of programs for visual effects are just a grey, boring screen, and you have a ball, but you know that ball is a light source, and it's only when you render it later that you see what it does. But if you do it in real life with your hands, you have a better grasp of what you're actually trying to complete on a computer later on. Does that make sense? Yeah? So a lot of the ways I teach anyone have TV shows in the 80s, like where they go, here's one I made earlier. Those old craft shows where everybody was waiting to get like their mom's washing up liquid bottle to make a rocket. You know, that kind of TV show? And giving you ideas of arts and crafts with stuff with PVA glue around the house. The principles of Bob Ross and those old TV shows are really stand in how to build and make things for film and games. And it's not about, like, I was trying to teach a student last year that you don't make a forest. you start with a branch, and then you turn that branch into 2 branches, and then 3 branches can become a tree trunk, and then you duplicate it and you flip it, and now you've got 2 trees. And then you take that one, stick it all together, distort it. Now you've got 3 becomes 6, and so on and so forth. So you end up army building your forest, and you can keep all of those trees, and every time you got to do a forest, you have the trees. You know, so I have all of these base books. Like, in the best ones are things like, you know, a horde trooper or a skeleton. So if I need to fill an army, that's a render just about to happen. It's very exciting. I can't remember what color, but what did I do on the last one? And she's actually almost finished. I can show you the build. It's on the last one of the last colors there. And I wanted to show you when motherboard is finished there, just how I put it together in Photoshop. Okay, so this one is rust and yellow texture, and I changed that in Photoshop to something else, and it helps me give a sense of scratches and realism. And do you know what's kind of ironic but fun, or love for my stuff is, I'm spending all this time in the last 20 years learning about all the technology in the world and digital technology and iPads just to make something look like it was painted 40 years ago. You know? But again, it has its place, because did anyone get annoyed when you were kids and you had something like a Commodore 64 that came with amazing artwork on the cassette and the game looked horrible? And it also happened, I remember Eamon O'Donoghue, another Irish artist working for Mattel. He does a lot of Masterverse boxes and stuff. The 2011 Thundercats Thunder Tank came out, and the box artwork had the wrong perspective and proportions on the Thunder Tank. Like, the front arm on the Thunder Tank was smaller than the other one, which makes no sense when it's closer to you. All right? Caravaggio taught us that a long time ago, with his hand off in the background that was the size of a giant. Okay? And I realised then that there's a place in this where digital illustrators should be learning 3D, because if someone from Mattel or Nika or anyone can send you the 3D model, and this is how I work for Battletech, they send me the same robot that's going to be the miniature, and then I put it into a scene that goes on the book covers where it's shoot, and they give me a bit of narrative design and go, this is the story, and all I really need is, okay, what colour is the robot, who's he shooting, and what colour are the guns? You know, is it going to be blue, red, or yellow? And he's, oh, it's a PPC. I'm like, what the fuck is a PPC? He's, oh, it's an electrical propulsion cannon. I know, and it shoots a big. I had to learn about more BattleTech stuff because I know the minutia of He-Man inside out. I don't for other franchises. Okay, but I love. I have fun arguing with other people online when they go, oh, but that's wrong. You shouldn't have that shield on He-Man. And I'm like, oh, I should, because in this episode and on this box art, you know, I know enough to put in the reference for myself, you know. So she's almost finished. But I have, the body is a little bit different, but by the time I paint it, as long as you have the main accurate sections here on the top and you paint it out, the focus will be on this part of the figure. It won't be on all of this. This is all here for the pose and stuff. And I gave her big witchy hands. Actually, what's really fun is 4 years ago, I was sitting here with Simo Sol, and we realized that we both like to do the proportions the same way. Simon, when he paints his characters, makes the head 10% smaller than it should be in real life, and the hands are 5% bigger. So all my rigs, when I make them now on the computer, I shrink the head down by 10%, and I make the hands and feet bigger. And there's a 12% rule with Hasbro when they're making Marvel Legends, which is the hands are slightly bigger and the feet are slightly bigger because you want to be able to pose them. Has anyone noticed, like, the McFarlane the McFarlane Batman stuff and everything? The hands and feet just seem like they could be a little bit bigger, and they're really hard. They're not toys, they're statues that pose. Whereas Marvel Legends, Black Series, Classified, Origins, they're actual toys. I remember you saying there that you sit down, you play with your kids, but your creations, you have to buy 2 of everything. I'm the same. The person who judges the best toys for me is my 6-year-old kid. You know, if he comes along and he robbed one of my Mythic Legions the other day, and he's playing one, and he goes, Daddy, I don't like this toy because the armor always falls off. And I'm like, yeah, it's hard to explain that. That's not really a toy. That's for adult collectors. You know, that goes on the shelf and looks nice. Whereas your Origins He-Man, you can throw it across the room and hit it off the wall. You can take it into the shower. You'll put it in a sand pit, and no one's going to go, oh my God, this should be mid-condition. Because I really love seeing the look on someone's face at PowerCon when I bought an Ular. And he was like, do you not want the mailer? I was like, no, ripped up the packaging and popped off the head going, yes. Because I only wanted the head for a custom figure. And what I do then is I put the Ular body up online for $70 for someone else to buy for a custom. Right, so I've got the two heads that I want. And there's a guy in America going, that was minted box. What the fuck is he doing? You know, a complete sacrilege. And you should see the looks on people's faces when I spray painted my Eternia. My old, because I only had the parts. It was not complete. It was not worth $14,000. And to scan the Grayskull tower, I actually had to saw it in half, cut it open, and scan two parts, and then put it back together with glue, and then put it back together in ZBrush. In real life, I couldn't scan it otherwise. And yeah, I should have done a video of me sawing that in half. That would have driven people mental, wouldn't it? But it's just a fun reaction to some of the work because I'm a customizer. The thing about He-Man for me, and I had a conversation luckily with Mark Taylor about this, was it wasn't about the story. It wasn't about filmation and canon. For me, it was the box art helped me develop an imagination to do all this stuff. And when I say sandbox, it means in the world of a 5-year-old boy in the 1980s in Ireland, He-Man and Skeletor could be whoever you wanted them to be. They didn't need to live exactly like the cartoon did. And I remember watching Kevin Smith talk about imaginative play. So this was our life in the 80s. You're watching, and Brian Flynn from Super 7 said it, you watch a half-hour show and then you go relive, and for the next 3 hours you're in your bedroom with your Turtles or He-Man. And now the label is play therapy, because we have all these kids with screens who are like, ooh, you know, I'm going to play Fortnite for 72 hours. And now I have to go to therapy to learn how to play with action figures. Does that make sense? So I do Lego with my kid in the mornings, and that gives him, and you'll see him going, oh, I don't want to do Lego, I want to watch cartoons. And then I start doing the Lego, and a half an hour later, he's like, oh, Dad, if we put this bit in and we put that bit on, I'm like, yeah, 80s childhood. You know, I'm reliving my childhood by being a good parent. It's great. Sorry, I'm bullshitting away now while I wait for this to render so I can show you what the actual work I do. I'm going to finish the render there, leave it at that, and actually, one of the reasons I say that, guys, is because you probably notice as people in their late 30s, early 40s, I teach people sometimes who have lived their entire life on Facebook and Instagram has been there since they were a kid. They have a different, fluent understanding of how to use these things. But I have some of my students going, I don't want to do that. Why? Because I'm going to be an influencer. I'm like, who are you going to influence? You've got no skills. You know, you got to listen to me to get the fucking skills. Like how to do a 3D model, how drawing and photography relate to lighting in Maya. Oh, but there's an app for that. And I was like, don't you start with the AI shit. Do not start with me on AI. You know, because I have to learn how to use Midjourney to make sure my students don't cheat with Midjourney. You know, and go, I definitely spent 72 hours making that head and figure that has 16 fingers on one hand. So, I have to come up against all those ethics now, which is a lot of fun, you know? So, anyway, life philosophies aside, this was the program Keyshot. And so what I did is, look, I can go in there and I can turn my motherboard anywhere I want. I can turn on the lighting, which I've already set up, see? So it's nice dramatic lighting and stuff. So I have that ready. So I'm just going to put it in the Photoshop and show you how that translates over, because wow, I still got 25 minutes. Well, I got about 10, 15 minutes left, guys, so I'll get back into demo here. I hope all that other ranting and raving made sense. It's funny because I actually researched toxic nostalgia for my work, and I have a friend, true family, my brother-in-law's wife teaches episodic memory with prisoners in Barcelona. And episodic memory is how we actually like look at our child. 10 millimeters? Oh, 10 minutes. Okay. Okay. That was a little like very polite German. Shut the fuck up, Ken. Okay, so 10 minutes to show you actual stuff, all right? Comedy's over. Here we go. So I'll go to my renders. And if I drag in, this is the first render. Now, this is what the figure looks like, okay, with the 3D scans of motherboard's head. If anyone works for Mattel, please leave. I got the best compliment ever off Josh earlier on. He goes, "Oh my God, your illegal shit is awesome." And then I heard him talking to Gunnar, and he goes, "Yeah, homebrew." And it's like, how come you thought my shit was illegal and his stuff is homebrew? My stuff is homebrew. You know, I made it myself at home. So anyway, I ended up doing ambassador stuff for 3D scanning companies because they saw what I was doing on action figures, because they built this stuff for aeronautical engineers and reverse engineering and automotive design. And I'm there going, I'm going to put an action figure on this and see what happens, you know. So that's the color. And then I did this one in this lovely metallic purple. And I drop that in and I go soft light. And it blends in. So I have my base coat. And now I have my metallics. Just like painting a Warhammer figure. And now this one is going to be my light source. So I put that in and I press this button. So this is a basic, this is a workflow. This is not a Photoshop class, okay? Because obviously I'm not explaining all the buttons in Photoshop. And then I bring in, oh yeah, here it is. So this is the render of the line work. It's just black line. And I set it to something called multiply. And what that does is it makes all the white transparent. Okay, so I have these little black lines there. I can turn on and off. It's very subtle. I don't know if you can see it really well on the screen. And then I'll drop in. Now I'll bring in my translucent skin. So this one is called a white rim light, and if I press it, all of a sudden I get way, for me, that one just, boom, straight away, loads more depth to my character. And then I bring in my translucent skin one, and I drop it in and I press soft light. So now that's built up another layer of translucency. And then we bring in the last one, which was the yellow. Okay, but the yellow one goes through one of my own programmed buttons. These are my own buttons I've made in Photoshop. So I only have to press one once, and it does what's called an action. And I'm not telling anyone how I made it, because people actually sell this stuff, you know, for presets. So raster, and when I press that, and boom. Now, look, I have loads of scratchy texture on my model. See? There. So just to show you the very bit, so that's how the model is done. Then I grab my acrylic painting. And before anyone thinks, no, that's cheating, it's not, it's efficiency. There's no such cheating in art. You've got 3 days to earn a paycheck. So we go clouds and backdrops. And I have this one called Stolen Clouds. It's my favorite clouds. So I use these to highlight the edges of a figure. And then I will go and find, because we're doing landscape, let me just find some landscape clouds. There's some real clouds from a sunset. I can drop these in behind her. Scale it up, press soft light again. I always start in a grey background because I see things better on screen. And then I'll add a texture or, see, some of these actually were blended up from other He-Man pictures. I went, oh, if I take the figure out, this looks really nice on its own. So I flatten it and keep it and then cut it back up, and everything gets reused, but it never looks the same. Okay, it's not a repeated background in any of my work. Just, it gets all kind of combined differently. So we'll bring in this one that has lovely kind of copper textures and some clouds, and I drop that in, press off light. There we go. So there, now it requires a lot more work than this. So like we need to fade out that black line there. So that's basically how a lot of it starts. But let's say this was almost finished and we're going, well, it's motherboard, but she needs a bit of magic going on. I've got preset, like there's my bit of lava, right? Done from talc powder but made orange already. You screen that so it looks like there's some sparks flying from her hand. And if she has that kind of orange power, then it needs a source. So let's bring in a little red glow. And if I press screen, all black becomes transparent. And this is how people do smoke on guns and cigarettes in advertising. The black becomes transparent, and that goes in her hand there. Okay. So that's a start to it. So that I do this, I teach students how to make lightsabers and different things. But this is one of my favorite bits of lava. All of my Snake Mountain stuff is done with this bit of lava. This is off of a really kitschy, horrible 70s looking overhead light that I found in a restaurant that hadn't been redecorated since the 70s. And I went in there for breakfast and all my friends were hungover after a 40th and I'm there all excited running around with an iPhone taking 100 photos of a lamp. And they're like, what's he doing? They're like, you know, usual. I'm the guy on holidays where everyone's going, oh my God, look at that lovely cathedral there, Ken. What are you doing? I'm like, oh, dead bird. Oh, I'm going to make loads of money for a death metal album cover off that one. So, and that has happened. And this gets dragged in somewhere in a photo and made into lava. So you drag that in like that. You can go on the base of a piece of an imagery and press again screen. And as you can see, that's how I start to build up my imagery. Now, that's far from finished. It needs a lot of detailing, paintwork, texture. But that's how I build up all my imagery, all the stuff that you see that I'm doing on my cards, how I do these ones. But what I did with these guys is I did all the figures individually, and I brought them to Procreate and I painted them. And then I start to place them because I know that this has to be a square because I'm trained as a graphic designer as well. So I know how to use InDesign to do all the layout. And for instance, barcodes have to be at least 20 millimeters big because that's how a machine will read them. So things like that. And text on CDs is a challenge because it cannot go lower than 6 points because it's not legible if you go too small. So there's all of these factors that come into it, you know. So I try and create all my artwork thinking about the final product and how it's going to fit, you know. So how many minutes we got left? How are we doing? I got 5. Any questions? Take 5 minutes of questions. No? Oh, I explained myself really well. No one has any questions. So I'm going to drop that to my iPad later on, and I can literally just walk around the con painting motherboard afterwards. So should be a lot of fun, you know. And what I have found with my work, and I have to thank Grayskull Con because I first came here 4 years ago, I could not get over. I was so overwhelmed with the amount of people who just like want to buy prints off me or to, and I got Jitsu was spelled wrong, who give me feedback and say, oh, I want to see this guy in this position, and can this guy be fighting that character or this girl, or because they want to pick. Some people want depictions of stuff they've always had in their head, but they've never seen on a page, you know. So that's a lot of fun. And I did an image, I don't have it here, but I did an image for Einscan where I 3D scanned the Buzz Lightyear dropship, but I did the piece of artwork with all the Eternian palace guards. And the dropship from Buzz Lightyear is throwing a load of bombs, but it's Ram Man running off in the background, you know, because he's a really easy figure to demo with because he's so, I'm talking about the classics one, he's so chunky. Because I really like the fact it made him huge. He's like Juggernaut in X-Men, but in classics. You know, and again, it always for me comes back to that really modular feel and based. You know what archetypes are? Anyone know what the archetypes are? The basic, like that Star Wars was written on archetypes. The hero's journey. You've got the hero, the old wise man, the goddess figure. So we have them all in He-Man. We got the goddess. It's the sorceress. We had the old wise man, kind of in the father figure of Duncan. You know, we got the wizard or the playful clown sidekick, which is obviously Orko, you know. So all of these, and it just feels like it's just a franchise that you can make it into anything you want to make it into, you know. And for me, being able to bring in my photography skills, 3D, building, making. So I often start with action figures, just making action figures. And it gives me ideas. And now I have a 5-year-old who was like, oh, Dad, 6-year-old, sorry. And I'll show you just this last photo. He was like, I was messing with broken G.I. Joes at home that I bought to mess with, and I had this leftover head of just a random, really cheap, reduced to clear Marvel Legend toy, and he goes, that guy looks like Egon from Ghostbusters. So I made Egon in G.I. Joe. So that, I can't remember what Marvel head it is, but then I go, do you know what? That's a really fun concept that I could 3D scan this guy now and make it into Egon as a painting. You know, so, and the thing is, the packaging art should complement the figures. And that's what I'm saying about the box art on Commodore 64 toys. And I was talking to Josh outside about Drew Struzan. Do you know who Drew Struzan is? Some of you, he's the artist who did all the major movie posters in the 80s, Back to the Future, Indiana Jones. And he said, I've met Drew and I have some signed stuff. And I was like, I want to see the Willow movie from his poster if it was made now. You know, not the terrible series on Disney that they've actually cancelled so much it's disappeared. Has anyone seen Willow, the new one? Yeah, I'm so sorry. It's off, isn't it? But the movie poster that Drew Struzan did in the 80s that told you the whole story and narrative design of Willow, I want to see that movie, you know, because it's obviously different to what they made. But now in the age we have with technology, it's great to be able to do this stuff but keep that lovely retro feel. I'm a big fan of Stranger Things. You know, it's more 80s than the 80s. Do you know what I mean? So anyway, I'm going to leave it at that. Thank you for listening to me rant and rave. I've had 4 coffees, so I'm sorry. Okay, that's me done. Thank you, guys.